We continue the Shiur in Gemara. The Gemara says, Rabbi Yanai, one of the greatest rabbis of the Gemara in his time, had a garden, and in his garden there grew a tree with branches that reached over onto the front of his house, the street before his house. The street, of course, was public property. Now, public property there were no sidewalks and gutters. It means that it's a street. People ride by on their mules, on their horses, and the branches that stick out over the street many times can hurt passers-by. The point is, though, that the tree is in private property. The branches reach out to public property. The Gemara says that one day a man came to him. He came to court with people who were suing this man because he had a tree in his private property. Branches stuck out over onto the street, and they sued him. They wanted him to cut off those branches to stop harassing the passers-by on public property. Rabbi Yanai heard the case, and he said to this man, "Go, and tomorrow I'll give you a decision. Come back tomorrow and I'll decide the resolution of your case." The man came back the next day. Rabbi Yanai said to him, "I order you to cut off the branches of your tree." So the man said to Rabbi Yanai, "But Rabbi, I believe," respectfully asking, "I believe that you too have a tree with branches hanging over onto the street. Now, is there a separate law for rabbis?" So Rabbi Yanai said to him, "I'll tell you what. Go to my home. If you see that my branches are not cut off, you can leave yours remain too. But if mine are cut off, cut yours off also." Is it quite fair? He went, of course, he was surprised to find that the Rabbi Yanai's tree's branches had been cut off. The Gemara asks, why did Rabbi Yanai decide suddenly to cut off the branches of his tree when this man came before him? Why did he wait so long? The Gemara answers because he was not sure that people were opposed to these branches. Until he saw an actual case in front of his eyes, he understood that people didn't like it, and if so, he decided naturally to correct the shortcoming. Now, how come that they were there so long and no one complained? The answer is simple. Because out of respect to Rabbi Yanai, no one dared to say a word to him. It was worth suffering with it rather than to complain openly to Rabbi Yanai. To this ordinary man, they complained. When Rabbi Yanai found out that this was something people were opposed to, he corrected it. The Gemara asks further, why did he tell this man, "Come back tomorrow and I'll give you the answer"? Why didn't he say to him immediately, "Cut the branches off," if that's the case? Now, did he do it just to hide his own embarrassment, to wait until his are cut off first? It still wouldn't be proper. How can you withhold a law for 24 hours? The Gemara answers because there was a second law involved. There's a law which says, "Kishot atzmecha yachar kach kishot acherim." If you have a shortcoming, if you have a fault, and someone else has the same fault, don't criticize the other party. Correct your own fault first, and then go out correcting others. If you have something wrong with you, if you're doing something wrong, don't go out to attack others until you first improve yourself, until you better yourself, until you remove that fault. Then and only then do you have a right to criticize others and to ask that they improve themselves too. Then the Gemara discusses the case of the Churban Bet HaMikdash. Not the story, but the logical result as far as the rules of mourning. Today, after so many hundreds of years, 2,000 years, the pain has become lessened. Somehow we don't feel the sorrow that should accompany the thought of the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. The thought that the Shekhinah itself, the Spirit of Hashem, was driven out into exile. Though the Shekhinah is still at the Kotel Maravi, the fact is that the Shekhinah too is in Galut with the Jews. And the Shekhinah has been dispossessed from its original home, from the Beit HaMikdash, which was destroyed. Can there be anything sadder than seeing the queen dressed in rags, Kaviyachol, going out into exile, leaving the throne, leaving the kingdom, and to suffer for so long a period of time? If a person would really stop to think of how tragic this is, it would be difficult for a person to actually live. And that means literally. Proof is that we have a din, a law, that when a person has to say Birkat HaMazon, he must remove the knives from the table. You're not allowed to bench the Berek after eating with a knife on the table, except on Saturdays and holidays. But during the week, you must remove the knives from the table. Why so? The simple reason, of course, is that the table represents the Mizbeach, the altar. The knife represents an item of war, like a sword. And it's not fit to have a sword in the place where the altar is, which brings korbanot, peace between Jews and Hashem. But that's not the reason. The reason is that there was once a time that a man was saying Birkat HaMazon, and he reached the part where it says, O B'nai Yerushalmi Ira Kodesh V'Heira B'Yameinu, the third Beracha in Birkat HaMazon. When he said this tefillah, he was so overcome with emotion, so saddened, that he picked up the knife closest to himself and stabbed himself to death. For this, the Chachamim decreed that henceforth no one can have a knife near him at the time of Birkat HaMazon. Though today such a probability is very remote, there's no one today who will take that so much to heart, still the law remained. But we see the degree of how the Churban was felt, the heart of those Jews who were loyal. There were certain great rabbis who every day, when they wouldn't actually sleep through a night like most people do, they would take a slight nap. And the moment they'd wake up, the first question would be, they would rise suddenly and say, did Mashiach come yet? Is it the end of the Galut? If not, they would break out into tears and begin to cry again, just like a person crying over the death, the passing of one that's very close to him. This is how the Churban was felt by the tzadikim, and how it should be felt. Now the Gemara says that there were Perushim. Perushim means the very religious Jews, who shortly after the Churban, the second Beit HaMikdash, this was in the time of the Gemara, these Perushim, these tzadikim, decided that it is not fit for a Jew who is mourning over the destruction of the temple, when there is no Beit HaMikdash, there are no sacrifices being brought before Hashem, there's no meat brought on the altar, there's no wine being poured on the altar as part of the sacrifice, and certainly we, humans, servants of Hashem, surely have no right to eat meat or drink wine. So they decided to abstain permanently from meat and wine, even on Shabbat and holidays. Rabbi Yeshua, who was called the wisest of all Jews, approached them, and he felt very sympathetic towards them. He could understand their feelings. He admired the extent of their mourning. And he said to them, my sons, I want to ask you a question in reference to your conduct. Tell me, why don't you eat meat and drink wine? So they said to him, Rebbe, could we honestly eat meat, and we see that the Beit HaMikdash is destroyed, there are no sacrifices being brought to Hashem, there's no wine being poured on the Mizbeach, everything has become nullified and void. How can we touch this stuff, anything of this kind, when our Creator, Hashem, is not given this first. So, Rabbi Yeshua said to them, you're right. But, he said this very cleverly, very subtly. He said, your theory is a very correct one. Therefore, there's a bigger question. How could we eat bread? After all, there's a korban mincha, a certain type of korban, which requires bringing bread to the Beit HaMikdash. So why should we have a right to eat bread? These tzadikim answered, you're right, Rabbi, well, we won't eat bread anymore either. He said, fine. What will you eat? So they said, we'll eat fruit. So he said, in that case too, the question is, how can we eat fruit? One of the most important sacrifices brought is the bikurim. Bringing the first fruits to the Beit HaMikdash to the Kohen is one of the outstanding events in the Holy Temple. So they said, you're right again, we'll eat only the second part of the production, not the first fruits that grow. We'll be careful. So he said to them, well, how about water? It's a special event where they spill water, Nisa Chamayim, on the Mizbeach. How can we drink water if there's no more water being poured on the Mizbeach? To this, they remained silent. A person cannot live without water. They remained without an answer. They waited for him to reply. Yeshua said to them, my children, let me tell you, come and listen to me very carefully. I don't say that we should not mourn altogether. Forget mourning, chas v'shalom, because the Gemara says that he who does not mourn for the Churban Beit HaMikdash, that person will never see the consolation, the redemption of the Beit HaMikdash when Mashiach comes. He who does mourn with all his heart, he is assured of seeing the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash. So mourning is certainly very commendable and actually compulsory. At the same time, we cannot overextend ourselves in mourning because there are certain things that a person cannot live without. So, therefore, we have to do things within reason. We have to continually, constantly remind ourselves of the Churban Beit HaMikdash, as we say always, Im lo a'ale et Yerushalayim al rosh simchati. Even in our happiest moments, when our minds might wander, we must do something to remind ourselves that we are not to be really happy. There is a degree of sadness that must be injected into every happy event. Even at a wedding, when a cup is broken, a glass is broken, as a remembrance, a reminder of the Churban Beit HaMikdash. The happiest moment in a person's life still must have this reminder. At the same time, there are other rules too, other dinim, laws that we must abide by, also in members of the Beit HaMikdash. And these are actually laws of the Gemara, they are laws of the Shulchan Aruch, and it's strange that some of these things are not adhered to. Many homes do not adhere to this rule, though this is a very strict law. One is that if a person builds a house, he has his own home, and naturally he will plaster the walls, the ceilings, usually let's say white, pure white, or paint it so that it will enhance the appearance, to beautify it. And then says that he must have a square on the wall, a regular square, that's about 21 inches long by 21 inches wide. And this square must be left unpainted, unplastered. So if the entire wall is pure white, this should be a sort of yellowish color. An outstanding square showing that the house is not complete. There is something missing. If the house of Hashem has been destroyed, my house too will not become complete. Something remains, something is left over. And the place for this square is just as you walk in through the door, should be seen first. You go into many homes today, you will not see it, it's true. But you go into many homes and you will see it. Naturally, those that do it are the ones that are doing what is proper. Because that is a home where you feel the spirit of Hashem's presence. You feel the fact that the person is aware of the galut, even if he is in Eretz Yisrael, even if he's in Yerushalmi, even if he's living in the old city of Yerushalmi, near the Kotel Maravi. His house will still show that incompletion. Will show that he feels that above his happiness, above his own home, is the regard for the home of the Shekhinah. That's one rule. The rule, too, that a woman is required to partake in this. A woman who wears a certain amount of jewelry, ornamentation, must omit one item as a symbol, whatever the item is, but it should stand out as a symbol of her being in mourning. This is the prerogative for women, obligation on their part. 2, when it comes to a wedding, again, the happiest moment in a person's life, then the chatan is supposed to, we say, Im lo alat Yerushalayim al rosh simchati, I shall place Yerushalayim al rosh, above my happiest occasion. But it doesn't say above, it says al rosh, on the head of my happiness, my rejoicing. This means the head of the chatan. The din is that a chatan, before he walks to the chuppah, to the actual ceremony, he should take ashes, place it on his forehead, the place where the tefillin are. This is called efer, ashes. Tefillin are called pe'er, beauty. And we say the prayer then that may these ashes be changed to beauty, because tefillin are also called the crown of Hashem, meaning may we merit seeing the crowning of Hashem in his return to the Bet HaMikdash and the glory of the coming of Mashiach. Now again, the Gemara says too, it would seem to us, another question, the fact that being in Galut now, there is so much suffering by the Jews from different nations. There isn't a single nation who is warm or friendly to the Jewish people. If ever you see one that seems friendly, know that it is an illusion. There is no such thing as a goy who honestly likes a Jew. That is a gezerah, a decree that Esav despises Yaakov, despises a Jew. And why so? This is a chok. There's no reason for it, no logical reason. A goy just hates a Jew. The Jew could behave himself, conduct himself the nicest manner, the kindest manner towards the goy, the greatest compassion towards the goy. Help the goy as much as possible, and at the first opportunity, the goy will turn around and kill that Jew. Because this is the nature of Esav, the nature of Goyim. And therefore, there is no such thing as a nation friendly to the Jews. At no time ever was a Jew really safe in any country. If at any time, the Gemara says, if at any time the Jews found themselves at peace in a certain land where the government did not do anything to harm them, there were no decrees issued against them, it was only because the government felt embarrassed to do something that might hurt their name throughout the world. They might be called evil or killers or heartless, but not because they really felt that the Jews deserved equal treatment. But no time in any country can we really find ones that like the Jews, and this thought must be kept in mind. Now, since many countries are not just passively against Jews, they are active. They come out with decrees, they come out with actual pogroms, chas v'shalom. It would seem to us then, that since these countries are opposed to the Jews as a religion rather than as a people, they're against the Jewish religion. Take, for example, Russia. Let the Jews live in peace physically if they will just reject their faith, chas v'shalom. So it's always the religion that the Goyim are against. In that case, they try to stop Jews from performing mitzvot, Torah, mitzvot, Brit Milah. In Russia today, a vast majority of Jews, religious and otherwise, were not circumcised. They could not be circumcised. The few that were did so clandestinely, in secret, and at great risk. So that this was the main purpose, the motive, the goal of the Russians, of the Russia, the Sha'im, and so too of many other countries. In that case, then, the Gemara says, why should we bother to give birth to children? Why have children and bring them into an era, time when they're only due to suffer at the hands of the Goyim? Now, of course, it does not mean that the Jews should stop having children completely and cease to exist. It means, why should we have more than the mitzvah requires? The Torah requires a person to have one son and one daughter. Of course, it's a mitzvah for every additional child brought into the world, because this means you produce one more person, one more Jew to serve Hashem, one more Jew to put on tefillin, one more Jew to keep Shabbat, one more Jewess to light candles. But if there is so much suffering in store for them, why not just have the 2 children that the Torah requires and no more? The answer is that this logic is very true. That should be what we should do. Have only 2 children, and that should suffice for us. The fact is, though, that if we do that, they will decrease even still more, and then it might cause the end, pas v'shalom, of the children of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Therefore, rather than to decree upon the Jews, the rabbi said, rather than to order them to cease producing children, have only the 2, abstain from then on, they said better that they should be left as they are, and they should not mourn in that respect. Though it is wrong, it's a crime in a sense, let them not know this is a crime, let them do this crime b'shogeg, unintentionally, so that at least we know that we'll propagate the Jewish people, even if there is suffering in store for us. Of course, actually, what the Gemara means is that we should fulfill the mitzvah of having children, bringing Jews into the world, but at the same time we should know that if there's any suffering in store, then we should take it with a deep grain of loyalty to Hashem. Because as much as a Jew suffers, it cannot compare, kaviyachol, to the cries of the Shekhinah. When the Pasuk says that there's a sound, a bitter cry in heaven of Rachel, Imenu, Mother Rachel crying over her children, this Mother Rachel refers to the Shekhinah itself, the Spirit of Hashem, crying out in heaven over the exile of the children of Hashem, the Jews, and the Shekhinah itself suffering so much. So our suffering can never really compare to the suffering of the Shekhinah. That's why we should accept this suffering with emunah, with faith, but always with hope, with constant hope and tefillah, and the knowledge that definitely this galut will come to an end. The Jews will shortly be zocheh to a geula shlema, to a destruction of all the enemies of the Jews. The Jews will all return with the Shekhinah to Eretz Yisrael, to Yerushalmi, for the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash. Our time. We come now to a new series in the Gemara, series of stories, many stories told by one rabbi, Rabbi Bar Nachmani. The Gemara said, Rabbi Bar Bachana. Rabbi Bar Bachana told these stories, and the stories are known, and this is a title that may sound erroneous, they are known as the Guzmaot of Rabbi Bar Bachana. Guzmaot means exaggerations, which would seem to imply, chas v'shalom, that these stories are fiction. They are simple exaggerations. The truth is that these stories, though they sound like exaggerations, they sound like impossible, they sound like fiction, as difficult as it is to understand how these things could really happen, we must believe so, because the words of the rabbis of the Gemara are the words of Hashem. They are the truth. But it's true they were not told just for the sake of the story. There are very deep hidden secrets and deep hidden meanings in every one of these words. There are many Mefarashim, commentaries, who attempted to fathom the deep meaning in these words with different interpretations, and of course all the interpretations are true. all the moral lessons derived from these stories are true. Especially we have the first section of Rabbeinu Zal's Sefer, the Likutei Moharan, deals with the interpretation of these stories. Rabbeinu Zal said that Rabbi Nachman once came to him, appeared before him, and pleaded with Rabbeinu Zal to please concentrate on his stories in the Gemara and to give the deep, true interpretation of them, to which Rabbeinu Zal agreed. We have the first section of the Likutei Moharan expounding on these stories in clear detail. Now, we cannot take every story in detail. It's just important that we do not skip anything. We'll give the stories as they are told, and in some instances we'll bring out some of the deeper interpretations found, which should suffice for us. But when there's more time, each person should attempt to go through Rabbeinu Zal's Sefer, dealing with these stories in very deep detail, and also the other mefareshim on the Gemara itself that clarify the hidden meanings here. First case, Rabbi Nachman says that there is a special type of wave on the sea that is very large, very high, it rises very high, and this is a special wave that whose official duty it is to sink the ships at sea, to capsize them and to sink them. Now, this wave is one that fools the sailors. If a sailor would know in advance about this wave, he could perhaps put up some type of defense to move the sails in a different direction, so the boat would not capsize. But the wave itself presents itself in such a manner that the person is fooled, because the wave appears as a sheet of fire at first, a sheet of white fire. A sheet of white fire would never be mistaken for a wave. So the sailors are not prepared for this. They see an unusual sight. In order to combat this wave, Rabbi says that you need a special stick, a long stick, on which you carve out the names of Hashem. And with this stick, you beat at this wave, strike at the wave, and the wave will subside, the boat will be saved. This is the first item that Rabbi Nachman says, and the mefareshim explain this in detail, but this is also the first chapter of Rabbeinu Zal's Sefer. Now, this chapter is a very short one. It's just about one page in Rabbeinu Zal's Sefer, and in this chapter, Rabbeinu Zal said, a person who delves into this chapter, just this one page, could find the depth of Rabbeinu Zal's words, every single din, every halacha in the entire Torah, which means every halacha in all four sections of the Shulchan Aruch. This might sound like an exaggeration, Chas v'Shalom. And we say that we believe in the depth of Rabbeinu Zal's words. They are so deep, so involved, and so complex, that surely this is so, this is true. You can go through the whole Torah in one single chapter of Rabbeinu Zal's Sefer. Yet, we have one rabbi, Yaakov of Zal's grandfather, Menachem Mendel Schneerson, who wrote a Sefer, an entire Sefer, on this first chapter of Rabbeinu Zal's Sefer, dealing with this story, an entire thick Sefer in which he goes through all the four Shulchan Aruchs, showing the connection with that one chapter. Not that any proof is necessary, but to show for those who want to learn, who want to delve deeply into with faith, you do have a direct connection. Every din found in Shulchan Aruch is included in that one chapter. So deep are Rabbeinu Zal's words throughout the Sefer. It can be done with every chapter. This one is the one that's used to show as a sample, as an example of how deep the rest of the Sefer is, just as the Tikuney Zohar takes the first word of the Torah, Bereshit, and writes 70 chapters of Kabbalah on that, which could have been done about every word in the Torah also. Rabbeinu Zal says the interpretation of this story is, when we say a ship at sea, this, the Zohar Kadosh says, refers to always a person who was sent down, the soul sent down from heaven, placed into a body on earth, and in this life, it's like a ship floundering in waters, always at the risk of going down, going under. The risk is very great because the person's soul could, chas v'shalom, be destroyed. If he loses his faith, the soul is finished. He becomes Mechalel Shabbat, he commits certain major crimes, major sins, he's lost. So the entire life of a person is one of a risk, is one that's fraught with danger. His life is jeopardized at every step, every moment. Now, who is this person's greatest antagonist? Who is this ship's worst enemy? There's a certain wave that seeks to sink this ship. This wave, of course, is the Satan, the Yetzer Hara. With his temptations that he injects into the person, he leads him off the proper track and destroys him that way. Now, how come that a person knows that he is here for a mission? He is sent by Hashem, his soul was taken out of the heavenly realm, out of the brightness of Gan Eden, and sent down to this lowly earth, where life is one long series of sufferings. Why was that soul taken out of a life that is such pleasure, such joy, eternal bliss, and have to go through this short comparative period of sufferings and risks and evils? What is the reason for it? Because the person has to prove himself, he must prove himself that he is pure, not when he lives in a place where there is peace. He's got to be able to battle against evil and overcome, to win this battle. So a person's whole life is filled with this confrontation with the Satan, the Yetzer Hara, and if he wins out, the soul goes back to heaven, to its deserving place in Gan Eden. If he loses, chas v'shalom, it's the opposite. So the Satan knows that he's facing a neshama who is aware of his mission. If the Satan would come over to a person and say to him, be smart and commit murder, be smart and eat tarif, the person would say, that's being smart, that's stupid to go against Hashem's command. And he would discard the words of the Satan completely. This the Satan is aware of. He'd tell a Jew commit a sin, he'd never get the Jew to do it. The Satan uses his subtle tricks. He cloaks himself. The Satan, of course, is red, is black. Black stained with evil. He cloaks himself in white, very bright white. A white that is so clean and so pure that it would appear to a person that this is not the Satan, this is a holy tzadik, a holy leader. This bright whiteness means a mitzvah. The Satan will come to a person and try to induce him to commit a sin. How? By influencing his mind into believing that this is actually a mitzvah. When the Torah says that there's no greater mitzvah possible than the study of Torah itself, no matter what mitzvah you have, it's still part of the Torah. All mitzvot are in the Torah. But the study of Torah covers every one of these mitzvot, so you can never spend an hour's time and accomplish as much as you do when you study Torah. Whatever mitzvah you do, you have only one single mitzvah to your credit. If you study Torah, the Zohar Kadosh says that every word of Torah that you hear, every word is a separate mitzvah. So if you hear 100,000 words, you have 100,000 mitzvot at that hour or two. Whereas you can spend a whole lifetime of 70 years and never accumulate that many mitzvot. So here we have a case where the time is so precious and so vital. The ability to acquire these gems, so many thousands of mitzvot, this the Satan is well aware of. He wants to stop a Jew. So if he'd say to a Jew, don't study Torah, do something else, the Jew would ignore him. He says to the Jew, you know there's a certain mitzvah you're not aware of. The Torah says that the mitzvah of tzedakah, giving charity, is uppermost, above all. It saves a person from death. It purifies a person's soul. You can gain so much through that. And yet, give charity, it happens once a day, once a week. I can show you how to give charity every single minute of the day. How? The Gemara says if a person goes to work with sincere intentions of supporting his children, sending them to yeshiva, bringing them up properly, and the money that he gives towards their support is considered constant tzedakah. Satan says to this person, why spend time on Torah? It's very important, of course, very holy. You have a much bigger mitzvah. Go to work an extra hour today, and devote that hour for the sake of giving your children more luxury. Feed them better. After all, this is actual tzedakah. That's one example of the wiles and tricks, subtleties of the Satan, whose motive is to stop a Jew, to trap him, and to halt his advance in religion and doing mitzvot. How does he do it? By cloaking himself in a sheet of white fire, a sheet of purity, where the Jew will be fooled. Now, this can sink a ship. This can sink the person, the body, and soul of a Jew. How can a Jew combat this force of the Satan? Only one manner, and that is to increase. Put a lot of extra additional effort into the study of Torah. What is the Torah, the symbol of Torah? The symbol is always the letter Vav. The tablets were shaped in the letter Vav. It looks like a stick. And in the Torah, you have every word of Torah actually is the name of Hashem in different forms. The Arizal goes through whole passages and shows how we think irregular words are really different combinations and forms of Hashem's name. So the whole Torah is just filled with the names of Hashem. And this is what's meant by Rabbah when he said, you can combat this wave, this dangerous wave, destroy it, stop it, if you take a stick with the carvings of Hashem's name in it and strike at this wave. Meaning, take the Torah, which has carved out in it tablets, had the names of Hashem in it, the whole Torah has Hashem's name in it, strike at this wave with the study of Torah, you'll destroy the wave and save the ship. Also, Rabbi Nachman stresses the Gemara says that a person does not commit a sin if he is sane. Anybody in his right mind would never go against the king's command. He knows the king could easily behead him or hang him. He surely would not go against the command of Hashem. So how can he allow his temptation to overcome his right sense? The answer is, the Gemara says, that temporarily he becomes insane. He loses his mind. And then he commits the sin. His right mind returns to him. His sanity returns, and he realizes his error. He regrets it, but it's too late. Now be careful, it should not happen again. But then again, as temptation overtakes him, he lets himself sink into this lethargy, the semi-sleep state, and again he loses his mind and commits the wrong sin, and that's how he progresses on the wrong track. But it's always a person who has a degree of insanity commits a sin. One who is really sane would never do anything wrong. Now, if you have a person who is sinful, he's got the Satan over him, this person, to a degree, is insane. How do you cure him? There are two types of insanity. There's a person who is completely insane. No matter how you try to persuade him differently, you can't, because there's no mind to speak to him. There's another person who is evil, but he knows he's evil. There is still a degree of sanity to him where he knows he's doing wrong, but he cannot control it. He's lost his mind partially. He cannot really control himself. There are two ways to cure these two people. A person who cannot be reasoned with at all, he doesn't have the logic anymore, we use what's known as a kameah, an amulet with Hashem's name in it, special Hebrew words, and this drives out the evil spirits in a person's mind. It drives out the insanity. He becomes cured. So a person who's partially insane, he knows he's doing wrong, there's one positive cure. Reason with him and you'll fail. Take a stick and beat him mercilessly, no matter how little he understands, how little he can reason this out, he will stop doing what's wrong. Because the fear of that stick will cure him. So this stick again refers to the power of the Torah, the name of Hashem, and also the stick which could cure a person, a bad child, bad friend, by a beating that can drive out the evil force from within him, whether he likes it or not. By using this force, the person can destroy this wave of evil, this false wave of the Satan, and to purify himself where his ship will reach its destination, its goal, in safety, completely. One more, very briefly, a second story told by R Nachman, or a fact, that there are two waves on the sea, and these two waves are 300 parsa apart, which means they're 1,200 miles from each other, distance from each other. And these waves, when they come in towards shore, they rise up to a height of 1,200 miles too. Well, this distance, of course, sounds very strange. Is there a body of water that's that big, that high? Is it ever seen? And yet, this is, we said, one of the, what's termed as the exaggerations. We'll have many more, much stranger ones than these. But even the Moshe, one of the first commentaries, says that Rabbi Nachman's words must be delved into, as we said, with the hidden meanings behind them, but to accept them per se, on the word of the tzadik. Even the Gemara itself will soon tell us that too. Now, to return to this case, these two waves rise up to a great height, and they speak to each other. One wave says to the other, cries out loud to reach the other one in a distance. It says, "My friend, have you left anything in this world that you have not inundated, you've not flooded yet? If so, let me join you. Two of us are so powerful, we can destroy the world. Let's go out with full force, double tidal wave, and cover the entire world. Complete flood." The second wave answered, "Look first at the power of your Creator, power of our Creator. Hashem placed a small band, tiny strip of little granules, sand that's so tiny it's nearly microscopic. A small strip of sand at the edge of the beach, so weak and so meaningless, and yet the most powerful wave cannot pass that barrier. Hashem placed the sand barrier to stop the greatest, most powerful waves of the sea. Look at how powerful our Creator is. With one drop of sand, He stopped such powerful waves." This is the second statement by Aruch Zohar, and here again we have more than one interpretation about it. For one thing, this stands for the wave of troubles that beset the Jews throughout different generations, and how they try, these tremendous waves of nations, empires, try to wipe out the Jews as a people. They nearly prove successful, but there's a bit of sand. A bit of sand, that's the pasuk, that the Jews shall be many as the grains of sand. This bit of sand they cannot overcome, because this is the command of the Creator. These are my people, I will protect them. See the power of the protector of the Jews, the children of Israel, who, though they are tiny grains of sand, weak, helpless, yet the most powerful of empires fade away and are destroyed, and the Jews remain. This is due to the fact that they have over them a shepherd, a Ro'eh Yisrael, and because of the tzadikim, whose zechut protects the Jews. And the bulwark, the pillar upon which the Jews rest, is their emunah, faith in Hashem and the tzadikim. Because of this emunah, the Jews will continue to live eternally, will be zochet to return to Eretz Yisrael, via Mashiach Tzidkenu, in Bet Mikdash, V'hida, Amen. The second part of this interpretation of Arizal will have in the forthcoming shiur, B'ezrat Hashem. We continue the shooting minute. We're on the topic of the statements of R Avraham, and as we explained, these statements sound like guzmaot exaggerations, but there are deep hidden meanings in them. First off, we want to make clear that aside from all the depth that's found in them, aside from all the Kabbalah, all the secrets that are encased in these words, the pshat is a true one. Every word in these stories is true, as strange as it may seem. Abraham did see these strange items, though no human being could ever report having seen anything similar to it. And we'll actually come to a case in the Gemara later where there is direct testimony to the veracity, the actual truth of these statements. But that's not why he brings these statements. These statements are just levushim. They also cloak much deeper messages. As, for example, when he speaks about a fish that's 6 miles long, Rabbi Arizal says, and the Zohar Kadosh says that a fish represents tzadikim, a tzadik. The Gemara says, why is a fish like a tzadik? Because a fish lives only in water. These are the words of Rabbi Akiva. A fish cannot live without water. If a fish leaves the water, it must die. So too, a tzaddik or a Jew in general cannot live without the waters of Torah. In fact, the entire world cannot exist without Torah. As long as there is Torah in the world will exist. If at any moment the study of Torah would stop, Hashem would cease giving existence to the world. So the fish, the actual fish, we say the fish. A giant fish means the greatest of the Jews, which means the tzaddik. We say 6 miles long. This means that he encompasses the whole, the sea. Fish lives in the sea. The Talmud is called the Yam HaTalmud, the sea of learning. And this sea consists of Shisha Sedarim, 6 sections of Mishnayot, a total of 60 Gemarot, or 63, which come down to 60. So, in other words, these are words that represent something much deeper. Only I gave you a very light example. We're going to go into deeper explanations. Basically, we will try to adhere to the interpretations of Rabbi Arizal in his Sefer. Once in a while, we'll take a different Mefaresh too. But, as we explained too yesterday, Rabbi Arizal had a visit from Rav of Breslov. This means a spiritual visit and a vision, where he pleaded with Rabbi Arizal to interpret his stories for him, to bring out the deeper meanings in them. We started a story yesterday. We did not go into the actual interpretation. We'll take that now. Story of, or a statement by Rabbi Nachman said, there are 2 giant waves that are 12 miles apart, and these giant waves sweep over them like tidal waves. And though they are 12 miles apart, one cries out to the other in a voice that can be heard by the second. It says to the second, is there anything in this world that you have so far not yet inundated, flooded? If so, I will help you to flood the world. The second wave says it's useless, it's futile, because look at the power of our Creator. Hashem has placed a small strip of sand, tiny bits of sand, at the shore. And no matter how powerful the sea or the river or the ocean is, it cannot pass that small barrier. So imagine if we cannot pass the little drop of sand, how can we pass what's beyond that? This, we are under the power of Hashem. This is the statement, and we gave it an interpretation yesterday, the preface, but now Rabbi Arizal says, in brief. Of course, we cannot go into the full detail. There's an entire chapter on this, where Rabbi Arizal interprets every single word. We haven't got time for that. We'll just take certain selected words and get the entire picture clear. We say they're 12 miles apart. The Hebrew word for mile is very rarely used. We use the word parsa. A parsa consists of 4 miles. So when saying 12 miles, we say 3 parsa. Actually, The Gemara says here it was not 3 parsa, it was 300 parsa, which means 1,200 miles apart. But the idea of the 300 parsa is, the Menachem also stands for 300 is a shin. The letter shin has 3 heads. The letter shin also is the numerical 300. It means 300. The letter shin is also the abbreviation of the word sechel, a type of chokhmah, wisdom. Now there are 2 types of wisdoms, or powers of wisdom, where a person who is smart and a person who is wise and a person who is learned his wisdom cannot benefit him when it comes to heavenly powers. A tzadik who has the chokhmah of Torah and is a tzadik can accomplish certain things that are impossible for the ordinary person, no matter how wise he is. So this is called the sechel of a tzadik. Now there are 2 shins, 2 types of sechel. One is the ability of a tzaddik to teach Torah. The great tzaddikim used to have assemblies. They'd assemble their students and they would teach Torah to them. But they would not teach the Torah to the student himself. They would teach Torah to the neshama of the student. As is brought in the Zohar Kadosh, Arizal says that a person who sits in the class of a tzaddik, a chacham, then though he does not understand the lesson clearly, his neshama does absorb it. So physically or mentally he will not follow the lesson. His neshama absorbs it, and eventually, which means in Olam Haba, he will not have lost that shi'ur. He'll have all those words of Torah amassed, accumulated for himself. That treasure he'll have. So the Torah is said to the neshamot of the students through the Torah of the tzaddik, and one sechel is assembling, getting together the neshamot of the students. The second sechel is that when the tzaddik says Torah, he takes the neshamot of the students and has them enter actually into the words of Torah. They become one with the words of Torah. They become elevated to a point where then, when the words of Torah are absorbed together with the neshamot, they return, which means when the lesson is over, they return with a renewed power, a much holier degree, all through the words of the tzaddik. We're speaking, of course, about past tzaddikim. We don't have such powers today. The great tzaddikim of the past were able to do this. Now this story, this case, Rabbi Nachman says that these 2 waves, a wave generally means a person. Waves always stands for tzarot. Waves of tzarot, troubles that beset the Jews. This could come in the form of harsh decrees, where the Jews as a people suffer sporadically. You have a certain era, there are pogroms, chas v'shalom. Many Jews are killed. And then, when a certain number are wiped out, there is suddenly peace for the Jews for a while. And later on, after a period of rest, it comes back again. Why so? The Midrash says that Yaakov Avinu, when he said to his servants, prepare the gift for Esav, he said you should make eder levado, separate sections of sheep or cattle to present to Esav as a gift. The Midrash says that this really meant Yaakov Avinu prayed to Hashem and said, I know there are going to be very dark times for the Jews in the future, so please make a space between the dark times. If you give the Jews all the tzarot, the Yisurim at one time, they'll surely be wiped out, chas v'shalom. So give them a little bit of time where they'll be able to take it, they'll be able to tolerate it, and to remain as a people. Therefore, this wave of tzarot that comes intermittently. And it's because of these waves that the Jews are able to sustain themselves, to remain. Now, this, we're speaking now in reference to the entire Jewish people. You have the same wave coming to an individual Jew, not just as physical torment, but spiritually. A person finds himself tormented with evil desires. The Yetzer Hara attacks him. He wants to live as a good Jew, then he finds there are certain temptations that beset him, and he finds himself weak, and he finds himself falling. And when he falls, he regrets it afterwards, he does Teshuva. We have Yom Kippur, he repents, he prays to Hashem, take me back, I've done wrong, and he improves. And then when he thinks he's already at peace with himself, suddenly he finds new temptations come upon him, again he falls. This is waves of evil that come upon a Jew, in the spiritual sense. The Jew is supposed to stop these waves, destroy them, and reach a point where he is so pure that there is no trace, no vestige whatsoever of this tum'ah, these ta'avot, these evil desires. Here, Rabbi Nachman shows the power of the Torah of a tzadik. Here, these two nishamot spoke to each other. One said to the other, tell me, we worked, as good Jews, we worked to try to destroy any evil within us, any midot, any bad characteristics. Is there anything that's left after all your efforts? Do you have any bad characteristic within you that you want to get rid of? And if so, I will help you to flood this, to destroy this bad character, this bad characteristic. In other words, there was no senat chinam here. This is an ahava between one Jew and another. He wants to help them at the time of these waves of troubles. The second one said that not only did I not destroy my evil characteristics, but I haven't even broken the tiniest grain of sand in them. There's not one trace of good in me whatsoever. And still, despite this, look at the power of our Creator, meaning the one who recreates our neshama. Power of the tzaddik. He can take a person who's completely bad, take him, inject in him his words of Musar and Torah, and bring him back to a level of perfection. This is the great power of a tzaddik. And of course, there's a lot more depth to this. We once discussed this in reference to the holiday of Hanukkah. It perhaps would pay to repeat a few words from that shiur, one that the Zohar Kadosh brings, and it's brought in the Zohar Kadosh, but it's also brought in the Shulchan Aruch. The Taz in the laws of Hanukkah brings a statement. The Zohar Kadosh says that when Elisha Hanavi came to the house of this woman who was his hostess, who gave him a room, provided for him, and he felt very grateful. He felt he had to repay somehow. So he said to her, well, before that, he said, what do you need? And she said, I have nothing in the house, no food of any kind. I have only one drop of oil in a jug. So he said, that's enough. Take out your pans, pour that drop of oil. And as long as you keep pouring, that drop of oil will not stop till all your pans are used up. The Zohar Kadosh says, why did he have to use that drop of oil? He's going to perform a miracle. Why couldn't he just have said, let there be oil, let the house be filled with oil? The answer is because the nes, in order to perform a nes, there must be a yesh me'yesh. Create something from something that exists. Not yesh me'ayin. Something from nothing is too great a nes for him to perform. The Taz in Or Chaim asks, why do we celebrate Hanukkah for 8 days? We should celebrate Hanukkah for 7 days. Because the miracle of the oil was that there was a pitcher of oil with enough oil to burn for 1 day. The miracle it burned instead for 8 days. How long did the miracle last? The first day there was no miracle. The miracle was that it lasted for 7 more days. If we're going to celebrate the miracle of Hanukkah, we should celebrate just for 7 days and not 8. The Taz answers, according to this statement in the Zohar HaKadosh, we see that if the first day's oil had been used up completely, we could not have expected there should be a miracle of having nothing burn. there had to be some oil left over, and therefore, since some oil was left over, it means that the first day there was a miracle too, because less than a day's supply lasted for a day. That's why the first day, since less than a day's supply lasted for a day, actually, the poskim say that it was 1/8. The miracle was equal in all days. Every day, 1/8 of that pitcher was used. 1/8 of a day is 3 hours. So 3 hours worth of oil lasted for 24 hours. Each day there was the same size, same type of miracle. Now, we have established, therefore, that in order to perform a miracle, you have to have something on which the miracle should rest. Take hold of, and then expand from there. The kushya is, we find by the tzadik, who is known as the tzadik, Yosef HaTzadik. The Gemara says his greatness was that when he worked for Potiphar, whatever Potiphar asked him for, whatever Potiphar asked Yosef HaTzadik for, a miracle, he opened his hand, and there it was. So great was the miracle power of Yosef HaTzadik that anything asked of him was immediately in his hand. Now, his hand was empty at the time. From nothing, not from a drop of anything, but from nothing, there came about a miracle, and something appeared. How come this miracle by Yosef HaTzadik and not by Elisha HaNavi? The answer is that by Elisha HaNavi, we have the case of the 42 young men, 42 young evil men, who in a certain city provided water for the people. The waters in that city were very bitter. People could not drink it. And these 42 men went out and brought the water from out of town and sold the water to the people in the city. When Elisha HaNavi came to that city, he performed a miracle and the waters turned sweet. So, for this, these 42 men were now put out of work. They resented it very much, and when Elisha HaNavi left the city, they followed him, calling a very bad name. Calling him a bad name, a very insulting name. And the Torah says that he turned, looked at them, and the Gemara says, what did he look for? He looked to see, before he destroyed them, before he had them killed with his look, which created a forest and 2 bears that came out, killed all 42. But he looked first to see, perhaps there is a trace of goodness in these youths. And he saw they were completely evil, so he said, in that case, then, they've got to be destroyed. Even it says that for this, he became ill, he suffered an illness, the fact that he had these 42 men killed. Why? After all, they were completely evil, there was no possible trace of any good. The Gemara says he looked ahead to the future too and saw that no good children would come from them. What was wrong? The answer is, wrong was the fact that he should not have given up hope on a Jew. You see a Jew that's completely evil, work on him, strive to bring him back. Get him to do tshuva, no matter how far gone he is. Even if you think he's a complete rasha. A tzadik is one who must bring a rasha back. As we explained once, the Arizal says, in the Haggadah we have the 4 sons. We have the Chacham, Rasha, Tam, Enodei L'Shol. The Chacham, the wise son, meaning the Tzaddik. The evil one, the simple one that does not ask any questions. The Arizal asks, why do we have that in the correct order? The Chacham on top, then the Tam, the simple one, the third one, and the Rasha should be on the bottom, the last one. How do you put the Rasha next to the Tzaddik? The Arizal answers that when is a person a true tzaddik? When he brings the rasha close to himself, in order to improve him, in order to instill in him a new feeling of religion and bring him to Teshuva. That's a real tzaddik. This is why Elisha HaNavi was punished. Now, in a case like this, a tzaddik who does not fulfill this point, which means he does a lot in teaching, does a lot in helping people become religious, doing mitzvot, but not to the ultimate point, that tzaddik needs a drop of something in order to perform a miracle with. But if a person is a complete tzadik, 100%, which means that he will take the worst rasha and then work on him and not stop until he has made him do teshuva and made a tzadik out of him, that tzadik has the power of performing a miracle from nothing, because a complete rasha is considered a corpse, a dead person. There's no life in him whatsoever. If he can do tchiyat hametim on a corpse, bring life to a dead person, he can bring a miracle to something which doesn't exist. This is what the second person said. I don't have the slightest trace of goodness. I haven't corrected a midah, an evil characteristic even the size of a grain of sand. Even me, who is completely bad, look at the power of my Creator, the one who brings me to life. The tzaddik emet, who is so pure and so great that he can take even myself and draw me into his words of Torah, elevate my neshama, and bring it back purified and perfected. This is the hidden meaning in this statement, according to the interpretation of Arizal. As I said, it's very much in brief. If you want to read this in detail, all the words completely interpreted, translated, fitting in this interpretation, you can have this in the first few chapters of Rabbi Nachman Sefer, the Kutei Maran. Third case, Avraham says he told that he once saw a shed. Shed is a spirit that is half human, half angel. Shedim resemble humans in form practically. They sleep like humans, and angels do not. And they live and die like humans. They are like humans in these three respects. They're also like angels in that they have the power to fly as angels do. They can fly at infinite speeds, heaven to earth. They can visit heaven. They can foresee the future. Being in heaven, they can see what's going to happen in the future. And they have the power of transforming themselves into any form they wish. Though their original form is like a human being, they can change themselves into anything they wish, including invisibility. Now, of course, they have unusual physical powers. No human being can match the powers of a shed. A shed can pulverize a mountain, so he surely can destroy a human easily. And therefore, these shedim are called also mazikim. Mazikim means ones who do harm or destroyers. Persons have to be careful of them, and no person would be safe with shedim around. And that's why the Gemara says that the great tzadikim, Rabbi Nachman and Abaye, through their tefillot, through their powers, were able to force the shedim out of civilized areas. They are still around today, but they exist in non-civilized areas, and they remain incognito. A person might be going through a forest and see another man walking. It might be a shed, possibly. In any event, what must be stressed most is the point of emunah. This is one of the basis of emunah, that shedim have always existed, and shedim still exist. There are pages and pages about shedim throughout the Shas, all the Gemarot, and the Zohar Kadosh, and the writings of the Arizal, the Baal Shem Tov, and we believe the emunah shlema in their existence, though there are certain sefarim, certain Rishonim, who argue this point. We will not mention anything more about them. Just to state emphatically, we believe in Emunah Shlema as the Vilnei Gaon's refutation of those Rishonim who says that is sheer philosophy and not Emunah. Avraham says, I saw, well, you have the best words, I saw this shed, whose name was, better not to mention his name, the son of the Queen Shed. Queen Shed is the equivalent of the word night. Night means darkness in Hebrew. It also means crying, wailing. One who wails and cries, meaning a symbol of sadness. Sadness and darkness. And that is the exact symbol of Tumah. Simcha, happiness, is the symbol of Kedusha, while sadness and dejection symbol of Tumah, which are the Shedim, Mazikim. He said, I saw this Shed who was running along the top of the wall of the city. The wall of the city had turrets like teeth on top of the teeth of this wall, and just running casually. Beneath, on the ground, beneath the wall of the city, there was a horseman riding at top speed, and he could not beat this Shed. Shed ran faster. Now, one day, Rabbi Nachman said, of course, as a tzadik, as a rabbi in the Gemara, he was friendly with the Shedim, they would talk to and respect him. So he said, we once tested this Shed to see his powers. And we placed 2 running mules on 2 separate bridges. Bridges were far apart. These mules were running along, and we gave this Shed a cup of wine, 2 cups of wine, 2 cups with one of the cups filled with wine, 1 filled cup and 1 empty cup. And these mules running along, it was his job to leap from one mule to the second while they were running and back. And while leaping from one mule to the second, that means from one bridge to the second, he was to keep pouring the cup of wine into the empty cup and back. While leaping, and leap means he's got to keep up with the mules while they run this great distance, pour this cup of wine, and don't think we picked on an ordinary day when there's no wind. We picked on a day when a storm. It was a storm that was so vicious, so powerful, that the seas rose up to the heavens and down to the depth. Now, the king heard about this, the fact that this Shed had revealed his powers, and he killed the Shed. The question, of course, the simple translation of the story, which king was speaking about. There are 2 interpretations of the translation, whether it was the king of that government who caught this Shed at a time when he was available and had him killed, or, logically, the king of the Shedim, who said Shedim should not reveal their powers to mortals, to human beings, and his penalty was death, and he was put to death. This is the story Rabbi Nachman says. This is not, we would not classify this too much as a guzma, exaggeration, because we're speaking about a Shed. This we know of their powers, the Gemara tells many times. It's just again a strange story, but naturally there is a hidden message in this story too. Very briefly, Arizal says that this speaks about the power of the study of Gemara. Now, the name of the Shem we said was the son of night. The word night, the Gemara in Sanhedrin says, "B'machashakim hoshivani," I sit at night. This means Talmud Bavly. This means Gemara. We find too, the Midrash says, that Moshe Rabbeinu, when he was in heaven for 40 days and 40 nights, during the 40 days he learned the written Torah, the Chumash. During the 40 nights he learned the Torah Shebal Peh, the Gemara. The time best for learning Gemara is at night. Now, the study of Torah itself is one of the holiest, or the holiest of all mitzvot. And yet, a person might study Torah and do harm with his study, if the reason, his motive of studying is for the sake of kavod. He wants to gain honor, he wants to gain a great name, or he wants to use this knowledge to harm others, to attack other rabbis, knowing their secrets and their knowledge, to attack them. This is called learning Torah shelo lishma, not for the sake of purity. A person might want to learn Torah lishma, for the sake of the mitzvah, and yet he might be overcome with this desire, the feeling of power. He has knowledge to use this for his own kavod. How does a person escape that? By learning Torah at night. If a person learns Torah at night, he will be saved from this evil thought. Because the Gemara says, one who studies Torah at night, moshchin alav chutsho chesed bayom. From heaven they draw a line of chesed, of goodness, of kindness over him, and this is his gain. The mitzvah of studying Torah is one thing, but at night too, there's an additional string of chesed, of goodness, which this person gains by, and this chesed means that he is saved, he is spared, he is rescued from the wrong type of kavanah, the wrong type of limud. We speak about this wall. This wall means the tzadik, who is the chomeh, the fortress that protects the Jews. By going from one to the other, leaping from one to the other, this is, or in general, we speak about these two mules and like one to the other, the cup of wine. Here, the Nachman is telling us this fact. The Gemara Yamot says that when a person learns Torah below, a person learns with the proper kavanah, he learns Torah below, then the words that he says, he is quoting a rabbi from the Gemara. He creates a contact with the rabbi who said these same words. The Gemara says that sifsotav devot kever, even the lips of the rabbi in the grave begin to move. But more important is that he creates a contact between himself and the rabbi. There is sort of a silent meeting of the minds between himself and the rabbi. So he draws to himself the neshama of that Tana, that rabbi of the Gemara. Now this is wonderful if a person studies Torah with the proper kavanah. He's learning Torah in purity. The Tana, whose words are being spoken, is aroused in heaven. His neshama contacts the neshama of the person learning below. But if the person learning below is learning with an evil thought, a thought of shalom lishma, not for the sake of good, this actually hurts. The Tana cannot bear, he cannot tolerate to have this contact with this evil neshama. That's the meaning of lo yachilo. He was above the wall, and this one below the wall, and he could not, lo yachil, he could not overcome him. Also, the word means he cannot bear him, not tolerate him. Many words in Hebrew contain two meanings, and that's why we use one as a cloak for the other. Now, this too is what's meant when we say there's a storm that arose that reached the heavens and the depth. The heavens means the Tana in heaven. The depth means the person below, far below, who is learning Torah not for the sake of the mitzvah. And though the Torah itself is so holy, the question is, why doesn't the Torah itself protect this person learning it to keep him pure? That mitzvah of learning Torah alone should be enough. The answer is that in the Torah itself, there are two types of qualities. The Torah is called some, a medicine, but it's a medicine of life, or chas v'shalom, a poison of death. The Torah itself can destroy a person who learns it improperly. It is like a bride who is treated properly, and she is very kind and obedient to the groom. If not, she turns into a killer and would destroy her intended suitor. So in the Torah there is the medicine of life and death, chas v'shalom, life, some chayim for those who learn Torah in purity, the other way for those who don't. Between this we have the tzadik below, who draws out, we say he killed this person, the king, that's the man malchi rabbanan. The kings are the rabbis below, who draws out these words of Torah from this evil person, and by drawing out the words of Torah, that means he draws out his spiritual life. This way, he also saves the Tana above from having to bear, to suffer from this contact with this person. I gave you that very much in brief. As I said, if you want this in full detail, you can always take it in the Aharon Sefer. Another short, very brief saying. Hannah said, I saw once. I saw. Remember these words, I saw. Now, certainly, we have to say that if a word like that is said by a Tana, by an Amara who is so holy, a rabbi of the Gemara who has the power to be mechayem etim, bring that person back to life, as the Gemara says, then surely he would never tell a lie, not even in a hint. That's why we say these words must be taken with their depth, but also in their simple form too. Rabbi Nachman said, I saw once a ram, one day old ram, who was as large as Mount Tabor. How large is Mount Tabor? 4 parsec. That's 16 miles, which means the circumference completely, the area. His neck alone was 3 miles, and this ram, at one time was by the Jordan River, and he let out some waste, and his waste matter blocked the waters of the Jordan River. This is a statement. Now here, we won't go into the detailed explanation of Arizal, just a very short explanation from the Mefarashim, who say that the Jordan River, why is this word used? The River Jordan is the Gevul, the boundary of Eretz Yisrael, the actual boundary. Though, of course, we say that the Ever HaYarden, actually, the part that the Shevet, the tribes of Reuven and Gad, the half tribe of Menashe took, that is considered 100% like Eretz Yisrael too. But the Jews had to get into Eretz Yisrael, they had to cross the Jordan, and only then were they in Eretz Yisrael. So the Jordan, therefore, is the boundary between Eretz HaKodesh and Chutz La'aretz. This, too, is the boundary of that slight space between Gan Eden and Gehinnom. A person dies, if he's at Asher, then he's in the wrong place. Tzadik goes to Gan Eden. How far apart are these two? A hairbreadth. Very thin area of space. A thin area of space has many meanings, of course. This means that a person at one time, in a hairbreadth, a moment, a tiny fraction of a moment, he makes a split-second decision to do a mitzvah or not to do it. That split-second decision decides which side of the River Jordan he'll be on, in the Kedusha or otherwise. Or, the negative sense too. There's a chance to, an opportunity for a sin. He battles, and that split-second decision to abstain from this sin, he has gained himself entrance to Gan Eden. Now, this is a person can succeed in this battle against the Yetzer Hara, against the Satan, and to find himself on the right side without having the waters blocked, enter into the Kedusha if he performs the mitzvot right, properly. And what does properly mean? With humbleness. And if a person's large, he considers himself with haughtiness, with conceit, he's a mountain. That person, his sins are so vile and so many, that they actually, and so evil, that's why they are termed here as waste matter, that they actually block the entrance to the River Jordan, they block his entrance to the Kedusha, to the reward of Gan Eden. Rav Nachman said, one time I was going on a ship and I saw a fish that had gotten a tiny worm entered into its nostril. And this tiny worm can actually destroy a giant fish. It ate away into the brain of the fish, and when the fish died, the nature of the sea is it cannot bear anything dead. It casts dead fish out on land. The waters threw up this fish onto land with such a mighty force, this giant-sized fish, that the fish destroyed 60 villages. And 60 other villages came, and they had enough food. They provided enough food for the inhabitants of the other 60 villages. There was enough salt in this fish to provide the necessities for 60 other villages, and from the cornea of the eye, which is a fatty type of material, they were able to draw from that 300 barrels of oil. We left that. When we returned 12 months later, we saw that they were ripping apart the skeleton of this fish, and they were using the bones of the ribs of this fish, using those ribs as material to rebuild the 60 villages that were destroyed previously. This is a statement. Arizal says that this is one of the longer chapters of Arizal goes into very much depth one of the most intriguing discussions on an interesting topic in the Gemara. We don't have time for this to go to it in detail. We'll give it to you very briefly, superficially, but direct you to chapter 4, Rabbi Nachman Sefer. You'll have this in full detail. The highlights of it are that a person who finds himself with a germ in his brain, that means he finds that his kavanah, his intentions, his service to Hashem is not pure. He cannot daven with kavanah. His mind keeps wandering off, thinking things that are wrong. The avodah, service that a Jew does to Hashem with his heart and mind, the Gemara says that's tefillah. His prayers are the avodah. And where there is a germ of tum'ah in his tefillah, he cannot have the right kavanah and tefillah to serve Hashem properly, and there is a cure for this. There are three things he must do. First, there is the seeing. He has to see, appear before the tzadik. Tzadik, of course, is the doctor, spiritual doctor for a person. The person ails, he's sick, he goes to a doctor. He's very sick, he goes to a specialist, physically. If he is ill spiritually, his neshama is ill, he doesn't do mitzvot properly, he doesn't serve Hashem right, he has to have a cure for a sick soul. He goes to the doctor for the neshama, that is the tzaddik emet. So by going to the tzaddik and just looking at the tzaddik alone, just the iyat pnei tzaddik can cure a number of ailments. Certain evil inclinations, the part of a person can be removed just by looking at the tzaddik alone. I mean, there's a list that shows proof from the sentences for the Chumash, the Gemara, in detail. The second part a person must perform is the giving tzedakah to a tzaddik. This removes the rest of the evil characteristics to be done from a person, and then he has removed all the evil. But he still is not pure, because a person who goes through a forest, as the Gemara says, at night, and he's afraid of thorns, he's afraid of pits he might fall into, he's afraid of thieves, he's afraid of wild animals. If he has a candle, a torch, this would save him from thorns and pits, falling into a pit. But he's still afraid of wild animals and thieves. When the sunlight comes up, the sun rises, that's when the animals disappear, there are no more highway robbers, then he is saved. So the light of the sun saves him. But he still doesn't know where he is. When he gets to the crossroads, then he knows there's a sign which direction to go. So a person who sees a tzaddik, a person who gives tzedakah to a tzaddik, is like this light, the candle, and then the torch. But the main thing is the crossroads, which means the vidui devarim, to confess his needs before the tzaddik and to receive instructions from him. Then he is completely perfected. And this is what's found in the words here, where the Menachem said that this person, this fish, which means a person who's serving Hashem with desire, but he has this germ in him, and he goes through the perfection, the three items, and then he gets to the 12, when he turned at the 12 months, and he found that it was being rebuilt, all that was destroyed. 12 months represents the 12 gates of heaven. Each tribe of the Jews has a different shad for tefillah. And the tzaddik directs this person to the proper shad, perfects his tefillah, perfects his service to Hashem. In that manner, the germ is erased. He is completely cured spiritually. So that, basically, we see for Rabbi Nachman, as well as infinite times, in places we find that the exact cure for any ailment, the foundation for a Jew in serving Hashem is emunah. He must have complete implicit faith in Hashem and in the tzaddikim, and this way he is assured of life, both in this world and the future world. Let's hope that we are zochet to emunah, that this year, this day, we should be zochet to see the coming of Mashiach, the ultimate rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash, the Geula Shlema for the entire Klal Yisrael, the Simcha Klalit, Amen, Amen.